Hey, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of brotherhood. I am Eric Diamond,
I am Jason Van Dyke.
and we're back again.
For now,
For now, yeah, we'll see.
we'll
um,
see. we we we've both got internet slow issues tonight.
yeah. So
Forewarning.
yeah, fair.
Forewarning. This might
Yeah,
go very badly.
could it could
So we'll
it
see.
could it could go
It could go
badly.
sideways.
It could go
So
sideways.
let's let's all hold our breath together.
Uh, Indeed. Okay, so we wanted to talk tonight about. So the show title is "The Curse of Nostalgia." And Jason, you when we were kind of talking about possible show topics and stuff like that, you
hmm
kind of brought up this, and tell me more about what you were thinking when you brought it to the table.
Um, I think that probably what I was thinking about at the time was that uh, masonry is a pretty conservative sort of an attitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what we talk about is that our traditions and our past, and that you don't there no innovations could be made in the body of masonry, blah blah blah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so um I was thinking a lot about how, like, but sometimes your past, like, you can get really trapped in your past. You have to be careful because as an organization, as a thing, right, you need to go forward. And we talk a lot about Masonic leadership, especially on the Grand Lodge level. We talk about leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and leadership literally means moving forward. It's the person who's helping pull or push people forward. That's what leadership does. And so that's, I think, probably where my head was at.
So okay, works for me.
Sure.
So do you think that masonry is you know for better for lack of a better term, kind of looking backwards? Are we navel gazing too much?
um, I think at its best, no. I think at our worst, yes, very much so.
Well, that's kind of like
But but
that's
right. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's a terrible answer, but I mean, like, yeah, we have a tendency to do that. We have a tendency to, I mean, it wouldn't be such a stock joke of about past masters in my year. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
That wouldn't be like, stereotypes exist for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There you go. And so, if that wasn't true, you know, we wouldn't, we wouldn't have that problem, and we would have real forward leadership. But we do. I mean, I think we do get stuck in the past very easily. And I think it's a tendency. And the way that our organization is set up, it sort of fosters that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that almost sounds like a hot take, doesn't it? But it's not. But it's not. I assure you, it was a cool take.
Cool
Um,
take.
yeah. I just think that yeah. Sometimes we get stuck looking backwards. I'm trying to think of a good example for you. Hmm. Here's a hilarious one.
Okay.
That's actually almost a counter example, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just something that popped in my head because it is an ongoing argument I think I have with myself, right? So our Grand Lodge prints dues cards every year, right? For members,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably a common thing that we all share.
Right.
Um, last so not just this year, last year. Okay, was our first year. This is our second year of printing plastic dues cards. But there's no point to printing plastic dues cards because
Well,
there's nothing to put on them. They're just more expensive. So here's the thing: we
but don't
print
you
dues
don't you
cards.
reuse them? I mean, don't you like have
No,
one plastic dues
no,
card and you're just
no. How could you reuse it? Where on the plastic dues card are you able to update it for the year for another grand jurisdiction to see?
mm, good point.
Yeah. So the reason that credit cards work is because there's a unified system that reads that data and says, yeah, this is okay. This charge is okay. You can use this anywhere that you have one of these readers. It connects to a central database. Because Freemasonry has no central database, there's nowhere for you to plug that information that you get on that card. There's nowhere to plug that information in and get a positive or a negative ping back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so plastic dues cards are literally just vanity. They're expensive vanity. And we print them at an enormous cost to the grand jurisdiction because they look good. And I've been kind of fighting against that a little bit, but I'm unpopular for that opinion because plastic dues cards, and like, I'm like, yeah, but they don't connect to anything and they don't do anything. And the Scottish Rite, Southern jurisdiction, had a really hard time adopting plastic dues cards because for the first few years they had to use little stickers on them with the year, right?
Yeah, right.
To make them reusable. But the little stickers peel off, they fall off, and they're generally a giant pain. And they're just stickers. The hell is the difference between a plastic dues card with a sticker on it or a paper dues card that just you get, a cardboard dues card you get every year, right? That's easy to reprint. That's, if you wash it, I can get a new one in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this is the kind of the philosophical thing, but it looks good. Now, that's almost like going forward for no reason. So a bit of a counterpoint.
Okay.
But it popped into my head, right?
Okay.
So stuck in the past.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So I, in spending time on social media, again, something I shouldn't do nearly as much as I do. However,
welcome to the club.
Welcome. One of the things that I see a lot of in Masonic discussion groups on Facebook is you see a lot of guys who are overly concerned about people trying to impersonate us and steal our secrets. And there's this whole
right.
thread around keeping the wrong people out, keeping people from discovering, I don't know what, but it's very,
wait a minute, like we got to keep the people out of Masonry.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah. We have to guard our West Gate better. We're letting the wrong types of people, and it is operating under an assumption that people are clamoring, that men are clamoring into the fraternity, and we somehow have to throw the drawbridge up and limit, be very, very careful. Now, look, I'm all for guarding the West Gate. Believe me, there's plenty of people who've come into this fraternity who had no business being here, right?
Fair.
But the assumption that we have to build all these systems and devices and methods to weed people out, it assumes that we have the same membership problem that we had in, say, 1928.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
That would be to me kind of a nostalgia,
right.
like where nostalgia doesn't really serve us very well. So instead of talking about how do we outreach to people that we want to bring in, right, and make Masonry look as attractive as possible, right?
Right. We're talking about how do we keep the riffraff out?
Yeah, how do we keep the riffraff out? And of course, riffraff is defined as anybody who's not like you, right?
Right. Correct. Well, we've always known that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So that would be one example. That would be one example of.
Can let me ask a question? Okay, so would wearing a suit and tie to lodge be one of those examples? Wouldn't it? I mean, really think about it, because look at the articles that we read last week. And then apply that to what we're talking about now, and that really, honestly, feels like that. I mean, it might not hold true. I mean, this might be a tradition that we hang on to. Mm-hmm. That's a positive thing. But I mean, on its face, I mean, you've kind of got to think about it as this could be one of those things.
Yeah, I
Probably too
don't
early
know.
to tell at this point, but it could be.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily. To me, that's a different issue, right? That's not necessarily a nostalgia play to me, right? Because there's reasons. In other words, it's not looking back. It's not looking fondly back on a time that doesn't really exist anymore. Like
Yeah.
you can
All
sort
right.
of make the case. I mean, people still wear suits and people still wear tuxedos and still people still wear white tie. You know, I mean, they're
Yeah. Okay.
right. I don't necessarily think that that's um, a, a, a nostalgia play per
No.
se.
All right. Okay. Okay.
Um, but
I mean,
I
not
think
not yet.
not yet. But
Okay.
here's another good example. I think is just look at all the discussion that we have around history. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All
right.
right. No. That. Okay. Here we go. All right. Now I'm on your wavelength.
Okay. So when I started X-Oriente low,
Right.
these many decades ago, back in the 1800s, um,
Back when we used
podcasting.
a we had a wooden cone
Yeah,
that
we
we would
called it
stand on.
padcast. We called it padcasting back then.
That's right.
It
We
was
called it cone
leaflets.
casting. It was cone casting. Hear ye.
Um,
Yeah, it was
but
terrific.
when I first started it, one of the founding principles of Ex Oriente was that we were not going to discuss history really. We were going to
Yeah.
focus on the future of the fraternity and the
Yeah.
ideas of the fraternity.
Right.
And for the most part, um, I would say it's a little bit better now, but for the most part, um, uh, I've been kind of a voice in the wilderness, like, and we've been a voice in the wilderness, right?
Right.
And I think and one of the things that's really interesting is sort of the discussions that I read about, how, when was Masonry founded, and, the moderns versus the ancients, and where was the first, what was the first lodge, and blah, blah. And so much energy gets devoted to that
Right.
I think it kind of distracts from, I think it's kind of I don't know, putting your head in the sand seems like a harsh way to say it, but I think that there's an element of kind of we're losing ourselves in that sort of pursuit because it's allowing us not to pay attention to some rather unpleasant truths.
Yeah. Right. No. Okay. So where I would go with that is that I think that when I think of history, an overdone Masonic history, I think of Masonic biographies, which tend to be hagiographies. But
Wait, you have to define that because I don't even know what that means. What's a hagi?
hagiography?
Yeah, what's a hagiography?
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. That's I always forget that not everyone grew up Catholic and gets these words. A hagiography is it's the biography of a saint,
Oh, okay.
right? And so it's like it's the thing that the Catholic Church produces to give a life story of a saint after they're beatified.
Got it. Okay,
Okay,
it's sort of like
so
history made rosier.
hagiography is literally a fawning, um, overly uh, um, um, God, I can't think of the word. There's a
Affectionate.
no, it's a malicious word. Like not, it's not salacious. Like I've got salacious. It's a overly ah screw it. Anyhow, it's almost a sucky up thing kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Like we're sucking up to you. Hagiography is a bad thing.
Yeah, overly flattering, not
There you
real
go. There you go.
critical.
Overly flattering. Sure, that's exactly right. Absolutely zero critical. Like there isn't even a trace of criticism there. And so, but I think that we tend to do that, right? And so, like if I could tell you how many Masonic biographies of Harry S. Truman or Frank S. Land that I've read in my life, it makes me want to drive a spike through my forehead. And the thing is that I want to tell people, like, listen, you know, good. I'm glad we had these really interesting Masons, you know, but every single one of them is way back when. There are who now? Give me now. Or better yet, give me the guy that I should keep my eye on because he's a rising star.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we don't have him. And that's the depressing part, right? Is that we're looking backwards and we're looking at those biographies and we're trying to lift up those men because we've got nobody to look forward to. We've got nobody that's here right now that we can be proud of and talk about. And
which I might disagree with. Like I think we do have people like that. We just don't.
Well,
You're
their
right. Their stories go untold because we're too busy telling the stories of Ben Franklin, Freemason.
No. You know what? You're right. You're right. That's a bit take. It took it a little bit too far. Because you're right. I mean, we talk about Ben Franklin too much, or we argue about whether Jefferson was a Mason or not. Who cares? It doesn't matter. You know, we argue about whether the streets of DC were designed by the Masons. They weren't. I mean, and shut up. I mean, it's just this is the kind of crap that distracts us from what's real. You know what I'm saying? And what's real is that we've, as an organization, have to keep moving forward, and part of that is confronting your challenges, and and knowing your challenges, and then working day by day to get better, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what Masonry is, right? It's confronting your own challenges, and then working day by day to get better. I mean, honestly, and so the act of looking in the past, it's just like that guy at the party who won't shut up about his high school days. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Fine. You're a quarterback. It was awesome. What are you doing today? Why are you talking to me? There you go. Yeah. So Masonry tends to be the overly nostalgic guy at a party talking about how he was the homecoming king.
The glory days. Well, and so I think that there's a part of that too that is that's particularly disturbing to me. So like so I will I remember back in the day, and I think you were at this dinner. We were at RERA, so this is a Union number 6
sure.
thing. During Masonic Week. Okay. And we had a historian who was, I think Margaret Jacobs' protege. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she was amazing. She was a historian of Freemasonry, and she specialized in the history of Mexico. Do you remember that? Okay.
No.
You might not have been at that dinner. So she gave this.
I also could have been drinking heavily. It's an absolute possibility.
It's always possible.
Right.
But what was interesting about that presentation, so she gave a presentation on sort of the history of Freemasonry in Mexico and how Masonic factionalism sort of contributed to the Mexican Revolution.
Interesting.
And it was incredibly interesting. And basically what she was saying is that the Revolutionary War in Mexico was essentially a battle between the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. Right. They were, I mean,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. For like the Yorkists and the, who were like, they were the sort of very conservative.
Let's bring that back.
Right.
That would be exciting. That would inject some life into Masonry.
Right.
A good old internecine war.
Yeah, and then there were the sort of the Écossais Masons who were more like in the French model, right? So they were a little bit more in the right.
An internecine battle punctuated by actual violence. Sure.
Yeah, it was actually violent. I mean, it was like
right. I will buy a ticket to that movie.
And what's interesting is like, so when you go to this is something that I didn't know until I went there, but in Mexico, we used to rent a house in a very small town, and we would go grocery shopping
Mm-hmm.
at the and you know what they call ham there? So when you go get ham, like
Hamon?
deli ham,
Come
no,
on.
no, Hamon de York. It's York ham. It's York ham,
Okay.
right? English style, right?
I was just going to say. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So
Hamon de York.
it's actually had an effect. But my point is what made this presentation really interesting is that she connected it to present day,
Okay.
right? Is like there was a so what.
Yeah. Okay.
And so much of the Masonic history that I get exposed to in terms of somebody is presenting a paper, you know, it'll be, you know, the history of, such and such a Mason who was present at the Alamo,
Right.
you know,
Sure.
or, and it's like, and then he did this, and then he did that, and then he did this, and then he did that, you know, and he was a member of this lodge, and then he founded that lodge, and, you know, but there's no so what at the end. I'm just waiting for this, like, so what does it tell us about Masonry today? What does it tell us about our present circumstances? What can we learn from this guy's life? None of that. It's all like, you know, and
So this weekend is the 10th anniversary of the Colonial Lodge. And for those of you keeping track at home, that's my lodge and a lodge I founded. Anyhow, it's our 10th anniversary, and so there will be much nostalgia this weekend.
uh-huh.
And what I'm laughing about thinking is that my biography will be like, he founded this lodge. I mean, there's not much else to tell. Yeah, and he has no bearing on the future. That's it. It's done.
Right.
I can
Jason Van Dyke, Freemason.
He closed his eyes, died, and there was nothing.
Right. And so
that's it. Right.
Yeah. And so that to me, like,
What have you learned? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. That's hilarious, actually. And I've never noticed that. It's a sharp observation, because you're right. History is supposed to inform us and teach us about our present and our future. It's the reason that we study it. But a lot of times we just look back on it and go, oh, there it was.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the origins of Freemasonry in Scotland,
Right.
you know, it's
Sure.
it's great, but like, so what does it mean? What is it now? Real historians, you know, people like Margaret Jacobs, who I'm like a huge fan of.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I approached her to come on the show, and she declined.
Why did she decline?
Why?
Yeah.
Oh, she was very diplomatic about it. I mean, she was
Really?
very like, she's like, oh, I don't know that I'd have anything to add to the conversation. Everything that I have to say has been said in my papers, which, you know, that's true. You know, she might just be camera shy. I don't know. But
Did you write her back and go, I don't have time to read all your papers? That would have been pretty funny. That would have been pretty funny. I know, but that would have been pretty funny. That would have called that bluff.
No, I'm a big fan.
We agree, but we don't have time to read all your papers. We'd love for you to come on and do a half an hour.
Yeah, just summarize a career's worth of work in 30 minutes. Yeah.
40 if we're interested.
But she, you know, like, if you read her books, right, especially like Living the Enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
That's one of her best works.
Mhm.
There's a so what there, right?
Yeah.
Here's what it means that that all these things happened, you know, when they did, and here's how Masonry informed the Age of Enlightenment, and how Enlightenment values informed Masons, and how it shaped society and stuff. There's a so what there, right? And so I think oftentimes, you know, we miss that, you know, in Masonry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that there's a certain amount of nostalgia when it comes to, you know, the art of Freemasonry, right?
Sure.
Something was really,
I get it. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so it was interesting. There was someone had posted, I think it was in the Texas Freemasons group on Facebook. There was a painting, and I don't know who the artist was, but it was something called like the widow's sons with symbols, and basically it was sort of a surrealist
Hmm.
painting that it shows a guy wearing a short sleeve shirt and a bow tie, and he's has his hand on a skull, and he's like doing something with it, and there are these symbols that are just sort of painted in a very realistic style, just kind
Hmm.
of hanging in midair, right? So
Okay.
there's like
Sure.
a spade with a shell on it, and
Kind of cool.
the
Okay.
platonic
Yeah.
solids and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was sort of like
It's kind of
it was
fun.
interesting, right?
Yeah.
And people were just like, oh, this is terrible. This is awful. It doesn't mean anything. And what I saw. So my critique of the painting is like, well, no,
Give me a break.
what I see. Oh, and the guy had he looked kind of like a hipster. He had like
Sure. Of
hipster
course you
facial
do.
hair and
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
cap, like an ivy cap
Right.
on.
Yeah.
And what I said is like, here's a guy who is collecting all these symbols, but they're all outside of him. They're not inside of him. Right. And so he's sitting there wanting you to be impressed by him, but at the same time,
Mhm.
he's wearing a short sleeve shirt and a bow tie.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like he's still a victim of his class. So to me, I found some meaning in that. I found some
Sure.
worthiness in it.
But it's
But
hilarious.
because
It's
it
the same. You're getting that from the same people who are like, but Hieronymus Bosch, and you're like, no, like, you know, nothing Masonic there. Sorry, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, it's an interesting painting because it's really messed up. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yeah. Or just scratch the surface and go a little deeper. Like
Right?
what is it?
Exactly.
Yeah, like the lack of meaning.
Learn something about the artist. That tells
Yeah.
you a lot.
Um yeah,
You
and
know,
so then
I, actually,
yeah.
wait. This is actually interesting. So, I feel the same way about Matthew Barney. Do you know
Okay.
who? Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Do you know who I'm
right.
talking about?
I
Okay,
actually
so
I have that
I'm
film
sure you do. I'm sure you do. Which one?
digitally.
The Cremister cycle.
Yeah, the entire
All right,
thing.
that's great. Yeah. So,
I tried
Matthew
showing
Barney.
it. I have to tell you, I tried showing it at
That's
Lodge.
amazing. Oh my God.
No, no,
Really?
people got bored and fell asleep.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's what is it? 6 hours long? 9 hours long?
It's something like that.
Yeah, I think it's nine. I think it's.
Why
I
don't you
think it's.
explain what it is? What are we
Okay,
talking
so
about?
the all right. So first of all, Matthew Barney. Let's talk about who Matthew Barney is. Matthew Barney is a visual performance artist. Um, Barney is he's probably what in his 50s, early 50s now. He's got an MFA from Yale, which is a prestigious thing, oddly enough. But very, very intelligent artist who really thinks through his art a great deal. His visual style, the way that he presents his art, often is either as a live kind of a thing, a
Yeah,
performance,
live
or,
performance.
right, or he videotapes things, films them, but they are not movies. They're actual performed pieces of art, moving pieces of art. Um, they are deeply symbolic, almost dreamlike in a way, and really everything has been thought through. The costumes, the colors, the way that it's filmed, every single thing means something, and it's really purposefully and thoughtfully done. He's really challenging. And I mean that, like, the first time you watch it, you'll go, this is absolute crap. I do not
It's
understand it.
bonkers. It's like
It's
watching an acid
horrible.
trip.
Yeah. And you're
It's
like,
no, you know what it's like?
this is
It's like
what's
watching
wrong with
somebody
art.
explain an acid trip to you,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And then and you're like,
And you say,
making no sense.
right. And you say, this is what's wrong with art. This is exactly why I hate this. And then you realize that that's the emotion he's provoking. He literally wants you to have that. And then if you're smart, you'll start thinking about, why do I hate it so much? Or what did this do to me? Why? And that's when it gets really interesting,
Mhm.
because then you start learning about him, about why he's doing this stuff, what he explains some of this stuff to mean, and it's fascinating. He has a lot of Masonic symbolism that he incorporates into his art. By the way, he was also married for a time to Bjork, and when Bjork showed up at the Oscars in that goose outfit that laid an egg, Matthew
Yeah,
Barney made that. He made that for her. That was actually his creation,
that's so
which is
romantic.
Isn't it amazing? Uh,
but
so
so the
yeah.
Cremaster cycle was
Okay, and
a
tell us
film.
what is a cremaster?
I don't know.
Really, you don't know?
Yeah, no idea. What's a
Okay,
Cremaster?
it is. It's the sphincter muscle. It's the name of the sphincter muscle that is in your. I think it's in your seminal tract. It's the actual medical name for a sphincter muscle in your body.
Oh,
It's an involuntary sphincter muscle, and
oh,
I think it's in the seminal duct or seminal, just outside the seminal gland, something like that.
oh.
But yeah,
Yeah, had no
yeah,
idea.
it's
Okay,
vague, it's vaguely sexual but medical,
got it. Okay,
which is peak Matthew Barney, by the way.
so the Cremaster cycle was a series of films. Actually, it was one long film. He filmed it at the
The trilogy,
yeah,
each are
it was
and each are 3 hours.
yeah. It's a trilogy. He filmed it at the Guggenheim Museum when they were
Hmm.
renovating it. So they cleared
Right.
out the entire museum while it was empty. They gave him permission to kind of go in there, and he really kind of like wrecks the place. Like he
Oh yeah,
just
totally.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so but it tells the story of metaphorically the 3 degrees of Freemasonry,
I was gonna say.
right?
I was gonna say. Oh, tells a story is a real
Yeah,
stretch.
metaphorically.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like you really like even
Oh
as
yeah.
when I saw it, I was already a Mason
Right.
for many years.
Right.
And I was like I had to really work to like what? But
Uh-huh.
and I
But
think he wears
it
like
also
a
uses video game. It uses a lot of video game
yeah.
symbolism as well, or images that evoke video games, and that's the leveling up and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so
Um,
he plays the
yeah,
entered apprentice,
correct.
and he has like a pink fluffy Masonic apron that's trimmed in like ostrich feathers or something like that. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's
It's
nuts. It's
it
really
is
not. And like there's like the New York
wacko.
City Rockettes like at the base
Yep.
of the Guggenheim
Mhm.
who represent like something.
And
I don't even remember.
there's and the imagery is highly repetitious. It's just it's it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It is a piece of work. And the thing is that it takes a long time to really like watch it and pull it apart. But it's super fun. Like once you start to kind of get to it, and I would highly recommend watching it with friends and having a few drinks, because you will find yourself dying laughing and actually between dying laughing having really deep conversations that you didn't know you were going to have about something that 5 minutes ago you were crying on the floor laughing about,
Yeah.
and making fun of, and then we're like, there's something there's something there, and like it's crazy.
Yeah. It is.
It's
It
really
is.
fun.
It is. Yeah. It's nuts. And if you're if you're a Mason, it will. Many parts of it will annoy the crap out of you because
Yeah, totally.
he's very I won't say disrespectful. He's not really
But dismissive.
disrespectful,
He's certainly dismissive.
but yeah, like just the fact that like the entered apprentice is portrayed the way he is.
Yeah, right.
Like
Tells you a lot
mixing
about his
very
attitude.
feminine symbols with very masculine symbols.
Yeah.
It's very weird. Like he wears a tutu, I think, with the apron
For some of it. Yep. He's
and
got horse legs in some of it. There's
yeah,
there's a part where there's a doesn't he wear he's wearing a kilt as well, I
yeah,
think,
yeah, a pink
for a
kilt.
lot of it, a pink kilt.
Yeah.
It is
It's
mind-blowingly awesome.
yeah, it's very strange. Um,
It's been a long time since I
so
thought
why do
about
we
that,
bring
by
up the
the way.
Cremaster cycle
Well,
again?
but because here's the thing, right? Is that is a modern interpretation, right? That's a
Okay.
forward looker. You want to talk about Masonic art? Okay, there's a forward looker. There's something that does not cling to the past in any way, and in fact, some of its messages don't cling to the past because the past is dead, which is a really interesting concept that's left for a different time. But um, you know, I'm so used to Masonic art really being, well, I found this alchemical drawing. Okay, here we go again. Or here's something from Secret Teaching of All Ages. Okay. Come on. People draw now. you know.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't necessarily need to cling to those things. But often we find one image, and that's it, and that's what we're going to cling to. Um, so yeah, no, I totally get where you're going with that. But I think there's good stuff out there. There's modern stuff out there that's fun. It's interesting and it's really deep.
Yeah.
Right. Matthew Barney might not be. He might not be your cup of tea. He might. He might. He might not have the message you want.
Yeah. He's not really.
Right?
I can
Yeah.
tell you, he's not really my
Yeah.
cup of tea.
No. No.
But
But it's certainly Masonic, right? And
mhm.
it's certainly symbolic
Yeah.
and really causes you to think. And really, that's what art is supposed to do in the first place, I think.
Yeah.
So
I would agree with
that's
that.
maybe a different show.
So Brett Simon, who's been with us
Yeah.
since we started, he said, "What are you guys nostalgic about as you look back, and as we approach the new decade?" Uh, he said, "As we approach a new decade, is 21st century, in the 21st century, I guess. What
Yeah.
will we be nostalgic about in 10 years?"
Oh.
Um, I think I don't know what I'm nostalgic about. I think one of the things that I'm looking back that I am nostalgic about is the youthful enthusiasm that I had when I started as in masonry.
Yeah. Okay.
Like when it was
I'll
all
buy
new
that.
to me,
Yeah. I'll buy that.
and I was
I'll-
I was reading like the John Robinson book and going, "Wow,
Right.
this is really cool." Not
Mind
realizing that it's
Yeah,
like, oh
right.
yeah, there's like almost
no.
zero history in this,
Right.
or reading like not John,
Yeah.
Graham
Graham
Hancock.
Hancock. Yes.
And going,
Right.
wow, who knew? Nobody.
Yep. Nobody.
Not certainly not Graham Hancock.
Completely made up.
But
Yeah. No. Okay.
but I'm
I'll buy that.
nostalgic for that because
Okay.
I kind of want to I kind of want to believe in that, but it's childish
So-
to me.
I'm nostalgic. It is very in the same vein. I'm nostalgic for those early days of masonry, of my early days of masonry, when I was just starting to meet people from around the country that were Masons, and whether they had been there for a long time, like Rex Hutchins, or other guys like that, or if they were brand new, like meeting you,
Mhm.
right? When we were both relatively new,
Mhm.
and that was so exciting and so much fun, and my world had opened up so much. And at the same time, we hadn't, like, masonry, in my opinion, and this is, see, here's the nostalgia, right? Here's the nostalgia, Trav, kids, is we hadn't cheapened out. We were still at the Hotel Washington.
That's what I'm most nostalgic about.
We were
the Hotel
right.
Washington.
We were still throwing a damn good party. We weren't shying away from it. The Conference of Grandmasters wasn't in a place that no one wants to go in the wintertime. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we were doing things right. We weren't thinking about, well, what's cheap, because we don't have any members. And so, like, I'm nostalgic for that, and that's the trap, because when I think about that stuff, I get overwhelmed with, wow, how do we bring back the glory days? You can't. They're dead. They're gone. History is dead.
Yeah.
And it's fine to look back on it and try to understand it, but only if that is within the context of what's going on today, and how can I get better tomorrow.
So to the second part of his question, what will we be nostalgic about in 10 years?
God, I wish I knew. I mean, I really do. Does that show a complete lack of appreciation or thoughtfulness, mindfulness of today? probably.
I
I don't know. What do you
I,
think? What do you? What do
I
you?
think for
What do you
me,
think?
and I'm just
Yeah.
speaking personally, I think I'm
Yeah.
going to be nostalgic for Masonic Week. I think in 10 years
Still? Oh,
it's
you'll
going
be
to be
gone.
it's going to be gone. Like the meetings will still happen, but I don't think it will be quite
Yeah. I mean, it's gone.
the meeting of the minds that it used to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
it used to be a real like
Sure.
it's where the intellectuals would go. They
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
gather all at once, and now like what you're starting to see is they call them Masonicons, right? Like so you
Yeah.
have
Right.
like a
Yeah. Yeah.
Masonicon here and
Sure.
an
Hmm.
Esotericon there, and so,
Yep.
which is great. Like
Yeah.
I think it's a
Hmm.
terrific.
Those are really
Uh,
cool.
yeah, they're very cool, and they're sorely needed. Um,
It's a
but I think
fact.
a lot of the brain trust that I think used to descend on DC.
Yeah.
I think once the Rosicrucians left and went to Louisville in the spring or whenever they do their thing,
Hmm.
I think that the a lot of the reason that people went, to me what when Masonic Week started, for me what it was like all those meetings were an excuse. They were just an excuse,
Hmm.
right? You go to like
Yeah. Right.
the annual Grand College of Rights meeting, and really, if you were to sit in on one of those, you'd want to kill yourself afterward, just because there's nothing
Right.
that it's like
And
we're paying the
it's the,
bills, we're
sure.
electing the new officers. It's like,
In
oh
in
look, we've got the new
yeah.
collectanea.
In all honesty, that is the Conference of Grandmasters. It's weaponized boredom, and they do it to a. I mean, it's a science. How absolutely soul drainingly awful it is. I
Yeah,
mean,
but that's
it's.
okay.
I'd rather sit
That's
in a line at the DMV.
but right, but to me that was okay because it was an excuse. It was a
Right.
pretense to get
And
all
I
these
never right,
people
and
in
we
one
never went to the
place.
right, and we never went to the damn meetings anyway. And
Yeah.
if we did, we'd sit in them for a few minutes, and as soon as someone gave you an excuse, run the hell out the back door. We did,
Hmm.
and that was fun, and
Yeah.
and it was always hilarious fun getting out of things. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
like, it was fun. Yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy that, and it's still fun. Um,
It's still fun. It's just distributed,
right.
right? So you have to be in with the right guys and stuff,
True.
and it's something. It's been a dream of mine to somehow see if we could recreate that in a new way, right? And
But I
it's
think they have. But I think they have. Like they're the Masonic cons and the esoteric con. I mean, I think they have.
well, except
It's
that it's
just
distributed. It's not
it's
one place. It's not one
so
place where
far
everybody comes to.
now right, today. That's true. Let it grow, and I think it
Okay.
is. I mean, you've already seen that a couple of these cons have gotten really big. I mean, much bigger than they would have ever thought in a couple of years, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that growth continues, and then you'll probably see some consolidation as people go, hey, I really like what you're doing. We should combine our efforts. We could do it this way. We could get a bigger hotel. We could get, you know what I'm saying? We get a better speaker. That's how these things work. And so I think that it's coming. It's coming back. The issue is that you look at people like Rex, um, and all those that crew of guys who used to be the glitterati, the intelligentsia,
Hmm.
Art and Brent, all those guys are very much slowed down. They really, they're going to stop going to stuff PDQ,
Yeah.
and you know who's going to be the next ones that step up because believe me, in talking to those guys, they will tell you who came before them and who they knelt at the feet of and said, but you bathe me in your knowledge, oh great one,
Yeah.
and they had their guys,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so who's next is the big question, and that's going to happen within the next 10 years. I might be nostalgic for hey, I remember when I knew these guys. Now I have no idea who this big person is.
Yeah.
Who
So
knows?
one of the things that I think is interesting about nostalgia is that nostalgia colors. Nostalgia is a function of. By the way, you know what the word means. Nostalgia means the pain of remembering.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Nostalgia.
algia
Yeah,
is
yeah,
is a
right.
pain.
Like
Right.
neuralgia, right? It
Neuralgia.
was
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. It's a
It was like
pain in your nerves. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pain. Yeah, it's the
Huh.
pain of
The
remembering.
pain of remembering. Yeah.
Remembering, and
Wow.
so but one of the things that's really interesting about nostalgia is that it what you're nostalgic for is every bit relevant to where you are today, right? So like what we
Hmm.
choose to remember. And a perfect example of this, I've been giving this a lot of thought, is the commandery, right?
All right.
I know I told you I was going to take this. I was going to take this off on a
All
weird
right.
tangent.
All right.
Okay, so the commandery, the whole idea of it, and are you a Templar?
No.
You never went through it? You never did it? Oh, interesting. Okay, so here are
And
two of us.
and no no desire.
No desire.
No.
So
I know
I've
that
always,
you've wanted. I know that you've always been jealous of the chapeau.
in a strange way, I have. I have to
I
be
know.
honest.
I know.
I
I
have to
know.
be honest.
I know this.
In a
I
strange
know
way.
this. I know.
But it,
Do you think it's wait before we get to where you're going? I want to know. I want to know where this. God, don't want to say silly, but I'm gonna go. Where does this silly desire come from? Is it because you know that you're not allowed, that
yeah,
they don't want you?
yeah,
Is that so? That's it. Okay.
yeah. It's purely. I
Fair.
mean, that was
FOMO.
pure. It was
It's
purely. Yeah, it's FOMO.
FOMO and spite.
Yeah,
Get
yeah.
it. No, I
It's
get it.
yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
And that was at first, right?
Sure.
But then I
Okay.
started really kind of looking at it and thinking about it. And I was thinking about like, what is it? And so one of the things that I found really interesting as I was kind of like, looking on social media is how the perception of what the commandery is and what it represents has changed over the years.
Right.
And so now, and it brings to mind this concept called medievalism. Have you ever heard of this? Medievalism?
Mm-mm.
So medievalism is a really interesting idea. It's sort of a nostalgic practice where you look back at the medieval era
Mm-hmm.
and you extract from it something relevant to you. Like people get nostalgic for the Middle Ages, right?
Sure.
So,
Okay.
right. And so,
Yeah. Okay. Because there are Ren fairs.
yeah, kind of.
Okay.
I mean, that's
All right.
part of it.
Maybe is that am I there?
That's
Medieval
part of it,
times.
but it actually,
Medieval times that exists. That's a
yeah,
thing.
but it actually goes much further back, right? So,
Okay.
so what you have is it really gets started in the late 18th, early 19th centuries. When so you have the Age of Enlightenment, you have industrialization, you've got a lot of people who are displaced economically,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah. Sure.
and then you
All right. I'll buy that.
right, and then you've got the Enlightenment, which is sort of about we're shedding off these old ideas like church and God, and we're going to all be rational people and
Right.
stuff like that, right? And so then you get this movement called so then you get like the excesses of Enlightenment, right? You get the French Revolution, you
Right.
get the Terror, right? You get Napoleon, who's like sweeps through Europe and just upends the furniture,
Right.
And then finally, Waterloo happens. They finally get rid of Napoleon once and for all. And then we get this thing called the Romantic movement, right? And the Romantic movement was basically this sort of fondly looking back on all things medieval. And you start to get this like revival, right? So you start to see, for example, there's that famous castle, right? That Ludwig II of Bavaria built. They call it the fairy tale castle, right? In
Neuschwanstein. Yeah, Neuschwanstein.
yeah. So that's that's a castle that has never existed in medieval times, right? It's just a sort of
Right.
it's sort
It's
of
a representation.
it's a representation of an idea of
Right.
and so you start to get this like this movement of that's kind of a reaction to the Age of Enlightenment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the word medieval is coined around this time from I think it's medium evum, which means Middle Ages, literally,
Okay.
right? And so because that's when it starts as a study, and so you start to see like churches are getting remodeled and they're adding back the stained glass windows that they had lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's this new fascination with chivalry, right?
Okay.
And so what's interesting though is that like if you think about the Templar myth, the Templar myth story, however you want to define it, right? But if you think about the whole like Templar thing, in the 18th century, when Masonry was very much a product of the Enlightenment, right? The chivalric degrees represented something very different.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? The chivalric
okay.
degrees
Sure.
were
I'll buy
about
that.
like, because who were the Templars? They were a bunch of heretics. They were anti-church. They were inventing banking. They were doing their own thing. They were like, not
They were
answerable.
becoming really powerful.
Yeah.
Kings,
and they were,
when kings and church are scared of you.
yeah. And so, they were also doing it by, making nice with the Muslims and trading and loaning money and stuff like, so they were very, very progressive for their time. And so when you look back at a guy who's a Enlightenment era Mason and he's taking these chivalric degrees, right? To be a chevalier is the essence of the progressive gentleman, right? It's
Sure.
he's this sort of gentleman who is forward looking. He's a gentleman that's not ruled by the church. He's ruled by a more rational authority, right?
Right. Okay.
Right. And so then you get to, mid 1800s into this romantic period, and it's now like we're now looking back on it, right? We're now looking back to the medieval era as this.
Right. It's not the medieval era, and it's not the actual medieval era either. It's the romantic. It's the medieval era viewed through a romantic lens. So, for example, it's not Richard III. It's not Richard Longshanks. It's
King Arthur.
King Arthur. Right. Exactly. So things that never really happened, like the chivalric code, or the code of chivalry, and it's like, probably not a real thing.
It wasn't. It was a literary.
Right.
It was a literary thing.
Right.
It was
It was a device.
Wouldn't it be nice if, right?
The king actually cared.
Yeah.
And was a noble person, literally, and was actually a better person, and concerned about his vassals. But the truth of it is much more Monty Python. The guys wallowing in the mud.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's how normal people lived.
Yeah. and
short and violently.
Right. And so what's interesting is that, like, from my vantage point, right, growing up Jewish, right, the Crusades, which people talk about as if there was just one of them.
Right.
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 There were
The
like
Crusade.
5, and they were all different. They're all with all different aims and all that, right?
Yep.
But the Crusades weren't particularly good for the Jews, right? Pretty much
we're not.
Right? Pretty much the way you got to Jerusalem was by looting every Jewish community that you came upon.
Right.
Right?
Before there were banks, there were Jewish communities that you could loot and burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And so there's a passage. So on Yom Kippur, when we we're busy fasting and atoning,
Yeah.
For the air. One of the prayers that we do is sort of a martyrology, and they recall like all of these horrible things that happened to the Jews in the Middle Ages, right? It just wasn't good. So it's sort of like, so to look back and say, oh, that age is so romantic, and so I get the appeal of it, but it depends on where you stand and who you were, right? And so
yeah, right.
And so what's interesting is that over, since that romantic period, like there was the arts and crafts movement, which kind of romanticized, certain aspects of medieval. And then you get into the 20th century, and now you've got, totalitarian governments kind of looking back. So like Franco, used a lot of his, a lot of sort of Spain's glorious medieval past as imagery, right?
Absolutely.
The Nazis used the whole like myth of the Teutonic Knights as a way
absolutely right.
to drum up a sense of nationalism. There's a very good website called the Public Medievalist. We'll put the link in the show notes. But basically, what this is they do a podcast, they do a blog, and it's terribly interesting because what these guys are, they're a bunch of medieval scholars, right? Actual academic medieval scholars, and they're looking at today and how like our nostalgia for the medieval era is manifest, and it's very different, right?
That's really interesting,
right? And so like today, so for example, one of the talks that I do, and I'll actually commit this to doing this as an episode, probably sooner rather than later, is the Dark Enlightenment, right? So we've been talking about we've been talking about the Dark Enlightenment,
sure,
and the guys who are behind this movement, the Dark Enlightenment, which is a thing, right? They're very into this idea of medievalism. And so for a lot of guys, right?
So messed up.
Right?
Yeah.
So for a lot of guys, like this fascination with medievalism comes in a post 9/11 world, right? We were attacked by Islamic extremists. We have to go after the infidel, right? This idea of Templars being like the defenders of the faith against the Muslim hordes, right?
Correct.
Is really attractive if you are feeling, terrorized and you know what I mean? Like it's an enormously comfortable. Yeah. Hey, we beat them once, we can do it again, right?
Yep. Right. That's fascinating, actually.
Yeah, and so there, there's several good books on this, and remember Anders Breivik? So this was the guy he was a Mason in Norway, and killed like 33 people in a mass shooting.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. I mean, when you read his manifestos, he saw himself as the knight out to save, he was practicing chivalry. So when you look at the Templars, right, there was nothing chivalric about the Templars, right? Nothing. They weren't noble for the most part. If they were, they were like second sons and third sons, which didn't really mean very much, right?
Right. They were soldiers.
They didn't have ladies that they were, protecting because they were monks, right? So there's really nothing particularly chivalric about the Templars, right?
No. They were just an invading force.
Well, they were a group of warrior monks. They were the Shaolin of their time, right? The Shaolin of the West.
Probably much smellier, yes, but no, absolutely, right. I mean, right, but I'm thinking like right. They were, but warrior monks makes it seem like, well, there's they were there was a peaceful side to them too. There really wasn't. They were literally just made to go to war, and they were essentially zealots, right? They were whipped into a fervor for war by their own religious convictions and beliefs.
Well, yes, at the beginning,
and that's what, but that's what they were meant to do.
Well,
is they were supposed to be
yeah,
holy warriors.
yeah, they were
Um,
holy. They were holy warriors, and then
yeah, yeah.
after a while, they
Mhm.
realized that
We
they
call them
could do a lot
jihadists
better.
in a different language.
No, but well, but after a while, they
Hmm.
realized that they could protect a lot better by trading and by being smart and being a lot more open than in taking up the sword and doing a charge, right?
I don't think that. I don't see. I take issue with the word protect. I don't think that's what they were doing. I don't think they were protecting. I think they were controlling. And I think that's you know what I'm saying, is that they had conquered through force, and then they figured out that it was easier for them to get along by being decent rulers to where they had conquered, and so they started to be diplomatic. They started to do those things, and that's I think ultimately what got them in trouble, is because they started to act like their own state,
Yeah.
and that was not taken kindly by either of their employers, who were kings and the church.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
how forward looking was that, right?
oh, totally.
Like
I mean, big time. I mean,
right?
as forward looking as their banking system. I mean, to be quite honest, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's something. That's something. I mean, they were not without their positive impact on culture.
Yeah. Right? But now like you know, we strap on a sword
Hmm.
and we feel something. And
Right.
what are we
Right.
looking back at, right?
Right. Exactly. Sure.
It's like
Sure.
when you do, it's funny because my wife and I and my son, we went to the Renaissance fair this past
Hmm.
Labor Day. And because it's like on Labor Day it's half price
Yeah.
because
Sure.
they
Yeah. Yeah.
close the next day.
Uh-huh.
It's like their last
Right.
day.
Right. Right.
And we go to that
There's a run on mutton.
right? And what's interesting is when you go to a Renaissance fair, it is not a Renaissance fair. It's this
Yeah,
like
no, right.
it's
Yeah,
this
yeah.
opportunity for like
Yeah.
whatever fantasy you've got, like bring it
Right.
on.
Yeah. As,
Steampunk,
yeah.
sure, why not?
As,
Want to
right. As
dress
long
up
as
like
it's
a fairy? Great,
as long as it's vaguely European.
Yeah. Oh, look,
Right.
there's a Viking, and yeah, but not
Right.
even like
Right.
I saw geisha there. I saw samurai ninjas guys dressed up as ninjas. Like
Why?
it's whatever
That's
float.
great.
Like
Okay. Sure. All
so
right.
so I think that's kind of like that's kind of a nostalgia of sorts, right?
Sure.
Is that we're looking
Sure.
back on this sort of cherry picked reality,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And so
okay. Look at the Civil War reenactors. Right. They're the same thing. The guys who dress up like Confederates, and not just dress up like them, but like down to, hey, I'm not going to wear shoes for the next 2 weeks because I got to go bivouac in somebody's barn in March and near freeze to death. But I'm doing it because that's the way they would have done it.
Well, okay, so I draw a little bit of a distinction there, right? Because I think that I know reenactors,
Right.
true
So do I.
reenactors, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
true reenactors
Uh huh.
are they're like experimental archaeologists, right? They're understanding history by living it, right?
Sure.
That to me is not what we're talking about.
That's one aspect. The other aspect is that there's some that do it as a um, as a form of time travel, if you will, right? It's a way to to I want to use the word surreptitiously, but I don't think it's right here. But visit the past, right? In a very realistic, very holistic way.
Yeah, so I'll give an example. There's this guy I just started following him on Twitter, and he's this historian. His pen name is Outlaw,
Okay.
right? And he is his specialty is the South and the Civil War, and he's taken a lot of flack for basically not buying into this myth that it was the lost cause, and
It was the war between
about
the states.
states'
States'
rights,
rights.
and
It was about
right,
states' rights to have slaves.
right, yeah, right, and
That's
so
the right.
he's basically saying this in an open way, right? He
Sure.
he he
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
wears like a Confederate kepi, and he he's caught a tremendous amount of flack, to the
Sure.
point where he was
Right.
actually banned from Twitter, and
Hilarious.
now he's back. But
Right.
but I think to me that the where nostalgia gets dangerous and where it departs from what we're talking about with reenactors,
Mm-hmm.
right? If what you're concerned about is exact detail, like
Mm-hmm.
getting the shirt right, and getting the
Yeah. Right.
getting
Right.
getting the right things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy that I
Mm-hmm.
follow on YouTube, Jason Townsend, and
Mm-hmm.
he has a business. I've actually bought stuff from him,
Mm-hmm.
um, that sells primarily to Revolutionary War and early 19th century reenactors, and
Mm-hmm.
he does a really wonderful YouTube channel of like it's cooking in the 18th century.
Mm-hmm.
And so he talks about food ways, and he finds these like old recipes and tries to recreate them in modern times. And
Mm-hmm.
he
Mm-hmm.
teaches you how to make things like coffee eggs, which like just sounds absolutely disgusting, but it actually
No,
looks
it
kind of
doesn't.
like,
Sounds delightful.
yeah,
I
kind of
like
good.
both
But
of those things, and mushing them together sounds great.
yeah, so,
I'm in.
but he's concerned with understanding the history and how people lived, and he's willing to take kind of the good with the bad. I think what we're talking about is when you kind of cherry pick the past, right? Is when
Sure.
you
Or
right,
or when you let the past take over,
yeah,
you know, and you lose yourself. And so I think that's the interesting thing, right? Is that in that way, it's just like to me what happens to some Masons when they get really into esoteric stuff. You end up losing yourself, right? If you
hmm
don't practice the Masonry part of it, and you don't use that as your anchor, you can easily lose yourself in the depths of what can be very, very crazy stuff. And so, like, if you don't respect the past in a way that you just say, no, but I want to be there, I need that, I have to have the full 100% experience, I need to be um that time traveler, right? If you do that, it's the same thing. It's you lose yourself. You lose your anchor that was today, that was reality, and you go into something else that's not positive, right?
yeah,
And it's actually destructive to you.
yeah.
And it's
And so
and then
my
and that's where you get like the Confederates in the attic stuff, where like there's a guy who literally is sleeping in a barn with no shoes, and when someone's like, you can get frostbite, like you can actually lose your foot, and he was like, that would be the best. Like I can only hope to hit
yeah,
that level of realism. And they had a name for in that book. I'm trying to remember, but there's a name for hitting that level of realism, like where like you actually have to lose a limb, and everyone just like, oh, we respect you so much. It's like, no, that's not the point.
yeah.
Like that's absolutely crazy. That's
Well, there was
nuts.
a guy. I remember there was a guy, and I don't. I'm not going to out him because I don't know. I don't remember his name. But in Illinois, who would dress in like Renaissance fair clothes
Sure.
all the time,
Hmm.
all the time. He
All
came
right.
to Grand Lodge dressed up, in a leather tunic and puffy shirt and boots, and the whole looking like a pirate.
All
And
right then.
that was his thing. And,
Okay.
okay,
Sure.
yeah.
All right.
But my question was, and this really is a question, and I was kind of hoping you were a Templar because then you could answer the question for me.
Yes.
Damn.
Yeah.
Is when you
Screw your ideations.
yeah.
Sorry.
So when you do strap on that sword, what
Right.
what is it about that thing that is appealing to you? What is it offering you? And look, I've heard. Look,
It's
I
it's the killing power.
No. Come on. I'm as critical as the next guy of all of
Right.
masonry. But my understanding, people who have taken the degrees
Yeah,
say
sure.
that it's really beautiful and there's a lot to it,
Sure.
and they get a lot
Absolutely.
out of it. And
Absolutely.
I'm just, as someone who's probably never going to experience that, right? I'm just curious as
Not
to
that I'm better.
no.
I know. I get it. I know.
I told
I'm
them,
just
I told them, and I stand by this, that the day that
yeah.
they remove the requirement to profess a preference for any particular religion, the crosses don't bother me, right? I'm happy to strap on a sword and pretend I'm a Christian monk for a few hours.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Fair.
fine with that.
Mhm.
It's just don't ask me to
Right.
take a vow to do something that I wouldn't take a vow in any other
Right. I mean,
context. Right.
listen, you're a member of the Scottish Rite Southern jurisdiction. You've taken most of those vows already for the most part. Those chivalric degrees, right? And
Maybe
there's big rosy cross on a whole bunch of them actually.
Oh yeah, no, I directed the
Right,
Rose Croix degrees.
right.
And,
So there you go. I mean, there you go. So
but
anyhow,
my
yeah,
question is like what's the appeal? If the appeal is to
right. I get
right
it.
is
Yeah.
if there's something truly Masonic about this,
Right.
then
What's
great, right?
the forward looking purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What direction are you going?
How does it inform your life today?
Right. When you strap the sword on and put the chapeau on your head, what direction are you facing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I totally
and so
get that.
and I've always thought, and maybe I'm wrong about this, and maybe someone in the who's watching this who can comment maybe has some insight into this. I always thought that when the commandery really became the commandery, when it was just not just a couple of obscure degrees that
Sure.
people did,
Right.
it was a reaction. It was a form of nostalgia for guys who had been in the military, who wanted to
all
put
right.
on a
Yeah, yeah.
uniform,
Sure.
and march around like they used to, right?
Yeah,
Back
and
in the good
they
old
used to
days.
march, and they used to march, and they used to do like drill stuff, which actually is really cool. There's a film reel that we found when I worked at the House of the Temple. We found a film reel of them actually doing the opening in 1915, and the Knights Templar, which was like 200 guys strong, marched through the streets of downtown Washington D.C. in formation, and we're doing drills, military
Yeah.
drills. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
I've read historical accounts where guys would wear their uniform to work. They were that proud of their affiliation that they that
It
was
just
cool
makes
for them
me.
to
I
do.
know, but it just makes me think about when I was a Cub Scout, how excited I was to wear my Cub Scout uniform to school, because that was because I went to a Catholic school, so we had to wear uniforms, and the one exception was that I could wear my Cub Scout uniform on the day of a meeting,
Yeah.
and I was just psyched.
Yeah, I was
psyched
I
to
was
wear
too.
my
I
Cub
loved
Scout
it.
uniform.
I loved it. I
So did
loved
I.
every second of it. And so that is my question. And I'm not really, I don't mean to pick on the commandery.
Yeah.
There
No,
are other bits and pieces of masonry too that
well, sure. And here's my thing is that I agree with you. I know friends that love commandery and really get a lot. They say they get a lot out of it, right? But I agree with you, right? What way are you facing?
yeah.
It's an important question. But I think you can ask that question about really anything in masonry. What direction are you facing?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think it's dangerous, especially today, in the without delving too far into politics,
mhm.
in the environment that we find ourselves in,
Sure.
that medievalism, it's a favorite technique of the tyrant,
Sure.
right? I mean, as much as the alt-right and the Dark Enlightenment is using the imagery of knights
Sure.
of old, right?
Right.
the jihadists are doing exactly the same thing about reliving the glory days of Suleiman, right?
Big time. Yeah, yeah, you're 100% right. And I think that there's another, in my opinion, more pernicious threat in America, and that's the '50s nostalgia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's driven um, by older people in this country, boomers and a little above, maybe a little bit of greatest generation, but mostly boomers, who think that after, 1952, we just all went to crap, you know, because, it was hard for them to grow up. They remember being a little kid, and they don't know that adults were just jammed down the rage and not allowed to talk about anything. You
Yeah.
put your hat on and your tie and you go to work. And if you are mad and if you've got things to do, just come home and beat your wife and child in silence.
And drink. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Get yourself drunk enough that you can get through beating your wife and child in some modicum of decency in your own home that no one cares about. Right? And so, like, they don't understand that they were little kids. They didn't see that, and that life was really tough that way. And society didn't allow you to spread your wings at all.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the '60s were a massive reaction to that, and they were at a weird time in their life growing up that they were like, ah, and they were stuck between, their parents saying, "Oh my God, the world is going to hell," and people who are just a little bit older than them going, "You don't get it. We're doing this for you."
Yeah.
And that nostalgia, that looking back on that Leave It to Beaver, that Andy Griffith world, that world never existed.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But even the
and
nostalgia,
that's dangerous.
even the nostalgia that the boomers had for the '60s.
Sure, absolutely.
Right.
Right. We changed the world.
We changed the world.
Let it right, and then we let it go right back to what it was, and in fact, we've accelerated it and made it worse. Sure, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And every time I think of that nostalgia, that almost pernicious nostalgia, it makes me think of that old Hal Riney ad, "The Morning in America," right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right, and that is the epitome of it.
All right, so Morning in America,
everything.
we have to explain this for
Okay.
For our younger audience.
Sure.
When Ronald Reagan was
it was his re-election campaign, 1984.
his re-election campaign in 1984, and he contracted the ad agency of Hal Riney and Company.
And we should also point out, just because this is interesting, most advertising agencies, kids, you'd think, are a bunch of liberal creatives. They are not. They are run by hardcore Republicans and conservatives. Always have been. It's a long tradition. And the best
depends. It
no,
depends.
the best and biggest agencies are always conservative leaning, and they're populated by creatives, maybe, who maybe tend to be liberals, but they're run by conservatives.
No,
they absolutely are, and have been for a long time. You look back, absolutely. We could argue this all night. I'd win. I have all of the ads to prove it. Is that literally the largest and the best creatives were always working for the Republicans. And in fact, in 1984, Reagan had what is inarguably the dream team of creative advertising minds in the United States at the time, who were marketing geniuses. And he had them all working for him, all of them. And the fact is, advertising-wise, the Democrats had no chance in hell. It was just too good. In fact, Hal Riney, that the ad that we're about to talk about, "Morning in America," is the most famous political ad, aside from Daisy, which is about the nuclear bomb going off, right?
Right, which was the Democrats.
Correct. Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And
all right.
absolutely. Right.
All right.
And
All right. Hang on a second.
okay.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
refute
Go
you
ahead.
because
No, go
I
ahead. All
work
right.
in the business, right?
Sure. Go ahead.
Most
I only
most
I only wrote my thesis on it.
okay. All right. So so the the makeup of the business today is it's a lot different than it was, right?
It's fair.
So
It's fair.
in those days, yes, you would have a guy like so the Hal Riney agency was headed by a guy named Hal Riney, and Hal Riney
Go
actually
figure.
did the voice. So he in fact he's probably best known for Country Time
Bartles and
Lemonade,
James.
Bartles and James.
He also did all of the Saturn ads.
Yeah. And he had this, and they
he would
parody
have-
him on. If you've ever heard
Right.
Prairie Home Companion,
Yeah.
right, that when
Right.
they do ads for the ketchup board, they're parodying Hal Riney. And in
Correct.
fact, it's funny. I used to freelance for Hal Riney
Yeah, he's the best.
in Chicago.
He's
and one of the
honestly
things
the best.
one of the things that was one of the funny stories is that the creatives were always like, whenever they had a really great idea, they would try to hide it from Hal Riney because Hal Riney would want to be the on-air talent, and they'd be like, I don't want
Yeah,
Hal to like
sure.
voice over.
Yeah.
But Hal Riney, he'd be like, it's
He has
morning in America.
Right. He has what? How do you pronounce-
Mellifluous.
Mellifluous. That's it.
Yeah.
Mellifluous voice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
He just has this great, and it's very
Kids go
American.
run out and watch Hal Riney ads now. They're
Yeah. So yeah,
genius. They
go
are
to
bored-
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, go to
Genius.
YouTube and look up Morning in America if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It's it's like it's Morning in America, and
Right.
today more people are
Yeah,
working than
More
ever
people are
before.
employed.
And
More
like,
more,
isn't it a great?
Yeah. It's
yeah.
everything, and then at the end of the ad, it's where you get literally to this day, everyone in every re-election campaign has said the same phrase, which is, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?"
Yeah. So
It's genius.
yeah, it was a
Genius.
great nostalgia play.
But it was filmed through gauze. Literally, it showed white picket fences, and that whole idea of Morning in America. It was filmed literally at what movie people call the golden hour, which is right before right at sunset and right at sunrise. So it's like early in the morning, and you've got that golden hue, and they film it through gauze so that it looks like a fuzzy, perfect memory. And it just hits every heartstring that you have. It's incredibly effective ad. Here's the thing is that ad, I think, was so effective that it literally drove nostalgia after that. Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley. I mean, you can go down all of these 50s shows that came out around that time. And that was how people were thinking was, we have this huge nostalgia for the 50s and for a simpler time. Even though, the 1980s, when you really think about them, weren't that complex. Right.
Well, yeah,
Right.
I mean, they were what they were, but
Sure.
but
Right.
I think the danger is that if you were white, upper middle class, right? The 50s were a pretty good time, right?
Well, no, not even that. I think if you were white, and if you were semi-skilled, and you had a manufacturing job, right? You were taken care of. You made a bunch of money. You got health care. You were able to buy a house, get a car, have a kid or two. You were never going to have the nicest car on the block. You were never going to have the nicest home on the block.
Yeah.
But, but you could, and everything was okay. You were comfortable, right?
So Jeff Gire correctly points out that the shows that you referenced are all pre-Reagan, which is true. Like Happy Days.
Oh, that's true. No, you're right.
Happy
You're
Days
right.
came
It
out
is
in the
pre-Reagan.
70s.
Yeah,
But,
you're right. You're right. That's fair. That's totally fair.
But I think the danger is when you look at stuff like that, you say, well, the 50s were great, and unless you were black, unless you were poor, unless you were Jewish, unless you were an immigrant, unless you were
unless you were Italian, unless you were Irish.
Irish, right?
You think about those times, you don't realize that, like, even just that glossy, well, white people, baby, back then you better not be anything but a good Episcopalian, or a Methodist. And everybody else was them.
Yeah. And so I think that to me, like, one of the things that I worry about in Masonry, I feel like nostalgia is a weight upon us, right?
Yeah, sure.
Nostalgia is what drives, like, one day classes, because the leadership of Grand Lodges is trying to get back to a time when we had big buildings and we were Masonry was better, and so what we're doing is and look, everybody knows how we feel about one day classes. Like, it cheapens the experience. We're willing to cheapen the experience in service of that type of nostalgia. And so I feel like that we should really kind of start to look at what we love about the craft with a more critical eye, so that we can strip away the cruft, the
good
excesses of nostalgia.
10 points. Yeah.
Right. And kind of start with a cleaner operating system. Right. Because I think that Masonry has a tremendous amount to offer the world. We need it today more than we ever have. We have a fantastic philosophy and set of tools that a modern critically thinking man can use to not just better his own life in very real and tangible ways, but also make the world better. Make their communities better.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it starts with being like mindful of what's real and what's nostalgia.
Yeah. I'll buy that. It's really interesting. And I was thinking about what you were saying, and, like, to me that also means that, like, when you join, when you're a new entered apprentice, or when you're petitioning a lodge, don't think too deep. Right? Don't
read
get
ahead.
yourself. Yeah, don't get yourself into that. When you're a new Mason, don't think too deep. Take some time on the surface. It's okay to be shallow for a while, because you've got to understand that stuff front, back, and forwards before you dive any deeper. Because there's a real danger of not being able to get back up. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and I would say also that it's important to process your experience through your own experience, right? Like it's fine to read.
Yeah. Right.
But what Mackey said about Masonry back in his day, and Wilmhurst and those guys, it's good to read that in context, but that's not the meaning of Masonry, right? That's not the meaning of Masonry today. No. And especially,
it's an artifact.
Like, especially the old timers, because, like, I mean, look, it's February's going to come around. I'm going to go to Washington. I'm going to sit down at Shelley's, and I'm going to be regaled of stories about N. Tracy Walker and what a great guy he was. And man, those are the days when Masonry was, and it's like, look, I get it. It's fine. But if that's all Masonry becomes,
correct,
we'll never grow. We'll never survive.
And we've totally lost our way. I agree. Absolutely. You win.
Jeff Jyer says you still have not read Suicide of the West. I started it. I suppose I should read it, and I should read it. We should read it and talk about it because I think
West.
it keeps coming up.
Why does it sound vaguely familiar? And now I'm going to the phone.
It's controversial.
I'm going to the phone.
It's
what is it? Suicide of the West.
Yeah, it's controversial.
Okay, whatever. I'm looking it up. I'm going to the phones.
It's kind of it was referenced. We did a show a while back where we talked about the McGuffey reader that was like Chris Hodep did a post.
Right.
We talked about that, and it came up then. Like he I think he quoted that book.
Oh my God, I'm just reading the synopsis. It's already wow.
Yeah, it's yeah. All right, Jeff, we'll
I'll do it.
We'll do it. We'll do it. I'm doing it for you, Jeff. I'm doing it for you.
Yeah.
But
does it count if I just do the Wikipedia?
No,
I'm just checking. Not. I'm just checking. Oh man.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll take a look at it. We'll take a look at it. But anyway, so that's our take on nostalgia, and
there you go.
The dangers of it, and we'll be
and other screeds.
another screeds, yeah. And we'll be back on next week with another show, and I'm kind of wanting to get a little bit more into some esoteric stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to get some good guests, so we're trying to.
Yeah. So I went last weekend. So on Friday, I spent the day at the Masonic Restoration Committee. They had a meeting here in Washington, D.C., and I am a member of that subcommittee. And it was really cool. It was a really, really good event. And there were really interesting people and really interesting speakers there. But on my way out the door, I ended up talking with one of the co-chairmen, and I said, I would love to have you on and talk more about what this committee does, what your vision for it is, and going forward, like what you see happening with the work that we're doing here. I'd love to have that on my podcast. And so he said, yeah, absolutely. Just let me know. So that's past Grandmaster. I think of Kentucky. His name is Patton Hart. Really good guy. Really great guy.
Great name.
Yeah. So I think we'll have him on. I'll have to organize that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah,
but he was really receptive of doing that. So that's something to look forward to, kids.
Yeah, and then I'm still working on. We're doing a show, a couple of shows. One is on sort of what is magic, and,
with a J.
And then we were going to have Pete Normand, if he's available, come on and talk about magic in Freemasonry, and he's got a really interesting take on.
He does. He actually does.
Yeah.
It's a great talk. It is a terrific talk.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Pete is
stay subscribed.
By the way, and fans of the show, Pete's been on before, and he is by far our favorite local cloud yeller adder.
Yeah, he's electric in his
the best. Best.
Like,
and dude just spits hot takes like he was a midday ESPN anchor.
Yeah,
but it's terrific.
But he's allowed because he's done the work.
He has, and a lot of his hot takes are brilliant.
Yeah.
Some of them inconvenient truths, some of them just inconvenient. It's just great. He is one of the most terrific people in Masonry. I love him to death. So yeah. Super
all right,
fun.
so we'll do that. Stay tuned. Thank you again to all of our executive producers. Without you, the show doesn't happen. We've been having technical difficulties for the last couple of months. There's been a lot of sort of technology shifts that we've been having to kind of muddle through, and so we really appreciate you guys sticking with us. If you like what you hear on the show, tell your friends, post in social media, let people know where they can find us. We like to think that we're the podcast for the thinking, the critical Mason. And we always want to talk about the things that no one else is talking about in ways that no one else is talking about. So thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.